Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Joel Ruiz and today I'm going to show you step by step how to do this beautiful zellige backsplash. Alright guys, so we're set up and we're ready to roll for our backsplash. I want to show you some of the tools and materials you're going to need. First is going to be a wet saw. Now you can do this with a snap cutter, but professional results you're going to need professional tools. So a wet saw, you're going to also use a angle grinder set up with a polishing pad, an angle grinder for your cuts. These will be for like precision cuts around your outlets, things like that. You can also do them here, but this just in case. You're gonna need some wedges, some spacers essentially, and then you're gonna need your thin set, your tile of course, a bucket to mix your thin set, and your trowel. So I want to talk to you about the different sizes of trowels. You can see clearly a big difference in the size of notches. The way I like to look at these is like a measuring scoop or quarter a teaspoon or whatever the size. This is going to put the appropriate amount of thin set on the wall for your tile. So if I'm going with a small tile like this, I can use a smaller 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch trowel like this. If I'm going to be doing huge large format tile, I need a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch, and it'll put big ridges of thin set, and that'll make a little bit more sense later on. But just think of it that way. The size of your trowel is according to the size of your tile that you're using. All right, so let me show you these ancient prehistoric tiles that we're working with. These look like ancient artifacts. This is actually called zellige tiles. I don't really know how to say it, but they're basically handmade and like pottery, essentially. They're very pretty when it's all done. You can see the imperfections of them, which add to the beauty. Before you start any tile, what you need to do is take some time to work out and figure out your layout of how you're gonna put the tile on the wall. You don't wanna figure this out as you go, it'll be a nightmare. So what I've done is I put a laser on this pole here, so it'll tell me exactly where my tile will sit. Now, on this side it looks good, but that doesn't mean it's gonna be the same everywhere. So I started doing this and realized this far corner over here out of camera is really, the laser will hit it like right here. So what you wanna do is not start at that spot, you wanna start at your lowest spot. So the lowest spot here is good. That means the full tile under the green line, but as I get over there, I'll have to start cutting the tile to get it all perfectly laser level across, which is a good thing. If you were to start over there, then you would have to start adding small slivers of tile underneath, and that would look horrible. So, like I said, we're gonna start with the lowest spot, which is this wall. It's all very level, but going along this wall over here, it starts to rise up, which is fine. We can account for that. This is the shortest side right here. So this side right here hits the laser. Now, that's fine, as long as you catch it in the beginning. So what I'll do is I'll cut according to that side. I'll leave a full tile on that wall, but as I get down this side, what I'll do is start cutting the tile shorter, and when it's all said and done, it'll be perfectly laser line level. So just think it through before, don't just jump into this. So we got everything here we need. I like having a sponge, that way I can transfer water in here easily. But you want to start with some water in the bucket, that way it doesn't stick to the bottom. You don't want to mix up too much. You want to be able to mix up what you can work with within, I would say, an hour and a half. I'm gonna go with like 1/3 of the bucket of the bag, not that much. Definitely gonna need more water. And you're trying to mix it to a consistency of like, I would say, not peanut butter, that's too dry, something more, a little more watered down. The best test you can do is whenever you're done mixing it, you're gonna stick it to your trowel, and it should stick to here and slowly run off. It should not immediately run off. You'll get a feel for it the more often you do this. That's the thin set, and that is perfect. It's exactly what you want. Slowly running off and still sticks as well. So we're ready to roll. Now normally what you do is let this set per the instructions on the bag. You're gonna let this set for about 10 minutes, maybe do any last minute prep you have, and then you're gonna mix this thing one last time right before you start working. So the pattern we're doing here is gonna be stacked. The tiles are just gonna go straight up on top of each other like this. So I'm gonna start here and work up. I'm gonna have to make a cut around this, but let's just take it one step at a time. I know that one tile against the countertop with a little bit of space is perfect. So what I'm gonna do is move my laser now because I need a vertical line versus a horizontal. And I wanna leave about 1/4 of an inch gap from the edge of the countertop, and then my tile will sit right there. And I'll just follow this laser line up and then make a cut when I get here. You wanna put some mud, some thin set on your trowel, and you can use a flat edge, and you wanna put that towards the bottom, and I'm gonna swipe up. You wanna, it's called burn it in. You're just gonna spread it out evenly along the whole wall before you put any notches in it. You don't wanna go too far, only work with what you can work, or only apply what you can work with within a 10-minute period. Now I can put the notches on, and what you wanna do is make sure your ridges are all running in one direction. The reason for that is because when you put the tile on the wall, there's gonna be little air pockets in there, and you wanna squeeze those out. And if they're going in all different directions, air is gonna get trapped behind your tile, and that's not good. All right, so there is a huge debate about whether you should back butter your tiles. What you need to do essentially is to put some tile on the wall. You can try without back buttering it, but you have to test it to see if the coverage is gonna be good enough. Now this is a backsplash, so it's not a shower. It's not super important that these tiles are 95% covered, but what I'm gonna do is wiggle it and take this off, and let's check the coverage. That's decent, and for a backsplash, that can slide. So I'm gonna add a little more thin set, and we're gonna keep rolling. We don't need to back butter. If you're doing larger format tile, you probably will. This stuff is not gonna come off the wall, no worries. Got one. Now this tile it's handmade, so there's a lot of variance in the shape and color and all that stuff. And that's fine, that's the look that the client is going for. So we do our best keeping it straight, but just know that it's gonna be impossible to keep it perfectly straight unless we were using a different type of tile. All right, we're just gonna keep going up. Now don't worry too much about this edge just yet. We're gonna address that in a second. So, awesome tool to have is these denture brushes. These are a little bit different from a toothbrush because they have two sides and they can get really hard to reach areas. But I love having this because you can just swipe any excess thin set and keep this edge nice and clean. You don't want to go too far before you clean this stuff because once it dries, it'll be very difficult and time consuming to get it clean. A quick little tip on how to measure without using a tape measure. So I'm gonna put this in line where I need it and mark where it needs to be cut. And then I'm gonna take it here and do the same again. And then I'll just connect these two with a straight edge. So I have my two marks and I'll use a square and then I'll cut this out. All right, now instead of making a big mess, I'm just gonna add some thin set to the tile itself. And we can add and we're off to a beautiful start. All right, so I reset my laser so that I can copy this line, and I'm just gonna try to go this way first before I keep building and building up. But it's gonna be the same process, just being mindful of spacing. So this tile is very much irregular, like I said, but that's what I love about it as well. So beautiful. It's gonna look like a Moroccan bar backsplash. The beauty is in the imperfection. I did, it's a good idea to check your coverage. So just pop a tile off every once in a while. And what I did is you do it in the beginning, you do it throughout the middle, and I checked it and I started to see that the tiles were not bonding very well. That's a normal thing with this type of tile. It's so dry in the back that it absorbs all the moisture. So I started putting a little dab of thin set on the back, just to back butter it some, a little bit more than that. And that will do the trick. Let me show you. That's plenty, that's good enough. I love these little wedges because any little adjustment I need to make with these lines, I can just push this in a little more, take this one out a little bit. These are very easy to manipulate. We made a lot of progress. I went ahead and finished out this whole wall, I'm gonna show you a few more little tips and tricks as we move along. When you get to a corner here, you have to think about what you're gonna do as far as like starting the next wall. The way I like to look at it is you want the tile to look like it was basically cut, placed on one wall, and then the other part will be placed on this next wall, the adjacent wall. These tiles are 4 inches wide. So that piece, the reveal, will be 2 inches. So I went ahead and cut this piece 2 more inches. It'll look like the same piece was cut and placed. That's what we're doing here, and we're gonna wrap it and keep going along this adjacent wall. I wanna show you more clearly what I'm talking about in this corner as you wrap. So instead of just starting with a fresh full tile, no matter what size tile you're talking about or working with, you wanna use whatever is gonna be visible here, you wanna have mirrored same size here. So instead of doing full tile, that looks kind of awkward. It looks like this tile, the illusion is that this tile is longer than the rest of them. So what I'm gonna do is use a cut tile like this. So now this illustrates or has the illusion of one piece of tile cut in half and put on 2 different walls. Keep that in mind as you are wrapping your corners. Now we're outside on the wet saw, and I want to show you tips on how to cut using a wet saw. The best thing about a wet saw is it's going to feed you water while you cut. Let me show you. And what that does is it reduces the friction and makes for a clean cut. If you were to cut with just a blade, you might as well use an angle grinder. But this is going to give you a high performance cut with nice no chips or anything like that. So what I'm doing here is I set up this stop. This just can be removed and placed where you need it. But I've lined up my cut. I have a mark here on the tile you probably can't see. But I'm gonna cut this tile here. And because I wanna cut multiple of the same exact size, that's where this comes in. And this little fence or guard, I'm gonna butt it up right to the tile and then lock it in. And then what I'll do is cut one tile, remove it, put another tile in and cut. I don't have to keep lining it up every single time. So let's go ahead and make these cuts. I have 5 I have to make, and then we'll be ready to wrap that corner. Another thing I want to show you is that this blade is not dangerous. So you can have a little more peace of mind working with a saw, because I can run this saw and put my thumb on it and it won't cut me whatsoever. Let me show you. It's basically like a spoon or a butter knife. It's super smooth, but goes right through tile. All right, so I got my pieces. Let's go inside and install them. I'm just drying these off so the thin set will stick and bond to both the tile and the wall. Now I want to talk quickly about the ridges of when you put this thin set on the wall. Like I said earlier, these ridges are basically going to give you the amount of thin set you need for the appropriate size tile. You have to make sure your ridges, when they go on the wall, are continuous. There's no breaks in them, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. Here you can see that ridges are continuous, but let me give you an example of where they're not. I would say down here, where you see this broken ridge, you want it to look like this right here. Perfectly continuous, nice line. You want to avoid that just for bond reasons. In this kind of area, this will not touch the tile and it may not stick to the wall. The good thing is we're doing backsplash. This is not a shower. So it's not super important that this tile has 95% coverage, but you want to build good habits, and this is where it all starts. This is your beginner course on tile. Then you can start doing showers and floors, and those situations, your coverage is much more important. The best way to get your ridges right is to have a 45-degree angle. So this is 0. I want to have it up like this, 45 degree, when I'm spreading the thin set. And that is what this should look like. If you have it too flat on the wall, less than 45 degrees, it's going to be inconsistent. You can use both sides of the trowel, the long side, the short side, but just always remember that 45-degree angle so you can keep that continuous. Another little tip I like to do is all the thin sets up here, but I need some down here. So I'll like shake it so it'll go all the way down to the bottom. And now I have a full line of ridges to work with. Flip it around. Now that looks pretty good. I'm confident in that this will give a good result. So I'm gonna go ahead and install these tiles. I am back buttering these. Just a little dab will do. Something like that, and you can keep rocking and rolling. Now I use a toothbrush. I think I mentioned this before, but I use a toothbrush, this denture brush, to get all these corners cleaned out. Keep your work clean, because once that stuff dries, it becomes way harder to clean out. You might as well do it now, or you're gonna spend a lot more time doing it later. I love these little wedges because you can make such little minor adjustments. These are from Calidad. I will put a link on the screen so you can see where to get these from. Highly recommend. I've worked with some like flexible ones. These are nice and firm. They don't flex. If you are planning to work with tile often, or you want to tackle your first DIY project, this is a must to get your professional end result. You want to be very mindful of your grout lines, especially in the corner, because that's where they can look really crazy. So take your time, make sure those are straight, and then when you start flowing along this wall, you have peace of mind that it's going to look good. And once I put this next row up, I'll be able to form it. It'll have a little more form to it. Right now it's like able to move so much, but this next row will give it some base to it. All right, I gotta make a cut up top. Just gonna put my tape measure, lock it in, and put it up to the top of the cabinet. And I'll leave a little bit of a space. So if you can see the tape measure, it's exactly 1 5/8, but I'm gonna cut the tile to 1.5 inches. I got my measurement for that piece I need to cut, and it's gonna be 1.5 inches. So I wanna show you real quick. I marked the pieces of tile. This is the side I wanna keep, so I'm gonna measure from that side. So I'll just flip it over and go to 1.5. And all you need is just a small little dash. You don't need a line all the way across, because your table saw is a straight edge. That's really all I do right there. But a second little part is you want to put an X, right? So when I go out there, say I get a phone call or say I get distracted, I'm not like, where is my mark? What side do I need to keep? Whatever. This is the side that needs to be cut. Secondarily, what this does is it tells me where to put the blade. So the thickness of the blade, it's like maybe 1/16 or 1/8. But if you put your blade, as you go to cut it, right down the middle of this line, now it's going to be a little bit shorter. So what I do is I now have an X, so I know where to put the blade. So the blade is going to actually sit like right there. It's going to run through there, so the left side of the blade will cut exactly where I need this piece to be. The blade's going to go right down the middle of those two lines, but you can see the thickness of the blade. It has some thickness to it. So let me line it up. I like leaving my tile saw loose. That way I can bring it down as needed, or I can cut a piece like this if needed. If it's all the way down here, you don't have a lot of flexibility. So it's just a little thing I like to do. Not everyone does that. Right there. Right there. And this Sharpie comes right off, any kind of glossy finish, so you don't have to worry about that. There's our piece. So I just put that last piece in. Now these have some flexibility, so when I put this next row in, I'll readjust and make sure they're perfectly straight. When you're tiling above your stove, you have to keep in mind what type of stove you have, or maybe a type of stove you're gonna have in the future. A lot of the other styles, they have a big back that you could just tile straight across and you'll be fine without seeing any of it. Here we have this low back, and we can see to the left and to the right a little bit past where this tile would end. Either way, whatever type of stove you have, you need to get a ledger board. And this is just a piece of scrap wood that I'm gonna attach to the wall, and then the tiles can rest on here, because obviously there's nothing on the wall that can hold it up. There's no countertop back there. What I'm gonna do in this situation, because we had this low back, I'm going to account for another row of tile that's gonna go below and down here. So I'll measure it out, attach this to the wall, and then I'll have a row of here, and then this row will be what you see across the front. So when this gets pushed back, it looks like the tile is continuous. You can't see to the corners where it ends. I made my mark, and this is where I want to put the ledger board. So what I'm going to do is just put this here, and then I'll use the level. I'm going to shoot this in, and that's good. That's strong enough. That will hold the tile here. And I want to show you a little pro tip that I use from time to time. So if you have a little small piece of tile, this is where this lines up. And instead of cutting a little piece of tile and trying to balance it and make it straight, I I just use one piece of tile and then score the front of it. You can see this is just one. So you can just use your wet saw and just barely touch the front. As long as there's enough room for grout to get in there, it will serve the same purpose. So there we go. And now when this goes back, you see the perfect grout line back there. So I want to take a moment to show you how to make measurements for a cut. I have this piece right here and it's kind of an unusual shape. So I'm just going to take you through how I would do it. So the first thing I would do, you can either do it all at once, or you could, for beginners, I would suggest cutting it in 2 parts. So the first part I would do is measure the maximum. So go to the highest point of your tile, and then we'll cut this notch out second. First, I'm gonna measure this. Keep in mind you have to have some grout. So I would say 2 3/4 plus a 1/16. So 15, 13, 2 11/16, and I'll make my mark on my tile. So I'll mark this and I'll just cut this part straight across, and then like I said, we'll come back and we'll mark this notch out. I cut this to that size. The grout line looks perfect. Now what I'm gonna do is line it up here where it's gonna go, if you can get it in there, and then make a mark, cutting it down right there. And now let's get this height. I would say 2 inches, maybe a smidge past 2 inches, but 2 inches looks good. And now you're gonna measure from the bottom, because you're keeping this 2 inches. So from here, we'll go 2 inches up, make a mark. Now I'll just connect these two and cut this rectangle out. I'm just gonna connect the 2 lines and cut that out. Now let's install it. And there you have it. That's how you make a cut. Now we're getting into the area where originally we decided to start on the opposite side, because this side gets shorter and shorter as we go along. So what you can do here in this moment, in this instance, is you can start lining up your bottom row and making your marks. And I'm just gonna number these 1, 2, 3, and I can go ahead and cut multiple, as many as I want really. As long as they're numbered, they can go exactly where they belong. And I'm gonna go ahead and cut all of these. So from here up, it's all full tiles. I don't have to go back and forth to the tile saw. Being tall and doing backsplash is very difficult. So you're gonna most likely find yourself working from your knees, because if not, you're gonna be bent over, looking up, very uncomfortable position. So get yourself some good knee pads and get to work. A big mistake would be to take a measurement once and then think it's gonna stay the same. Never assume that you can make more than one cut in construction, because things are not gonna be level, square, plumb, measure until you're certain. Double check, basically measure twice, cut once. I just cut these and now I installed all of them. So what I can do now is modify, tweak, make sure that these are nice and square the way I want them before I start filling this in, because these will lock up pretty soon. So I want to perfect these, get the spacing right, and then I'll be able to work up. At this point, you can pretty much see how important having a laser is. This would not be possible to be this accurate if I didn't have this. So if you're going to be doing some tile work, I suggest you get a laser. You can find them on Amazon. I'll put some in the link. And these are just helpful to have. So you can hang pictures with the laser, so many different uses for it, where you can just get rid of your level completely or just leave it in your garage. This will take place of that tool completely. If you are wondering why I'm choosing to put these spacers here versus just setting them on the countertop, well, anytime the plane is what is called plane change, so the tile is going this way and the countertop is going this way, you have to leave an expansion gap, basically a flexible gap. So I'm gonna silicone this whole joint whenever it's done, just the bottom. And the reason why is because when the countertops move over time, or if, a lot of weight is on here, what could happen if they're butted up to each other, it could pop tiles off the wall or just cause a lot of undue stress on the tile or the countertop. So you want to leave a little bit of a gap and fill that with silicone, which has the ability to flex. So that is why I'm doing this. You can skip this part if you want, but you are risking, having to fix stuff. This is a common thing in tile. It's called a plane change, meaning one plane, another plane. You always got to silicone those, just like in a shower. Any corner should be silicone. So I want to show you a tip when you get to outlets. There's a way to mark these that you make this thing easy on yourself, and there's a way to avoid a big mistake. So these screws right here, you need to cut the tile just around the screw. If you get past this metal part right here and you cut the tile this far, this outlet won't have anything to attach to and come forward to sit on. So what I do is I hover the tile, I keep in mind my gap here, and then I'm gonna make the mark just below the screw, and then I'll move it over here and I'll make the 2 marks where it needs to be cut as well, right there. And I'm minding my gap right here, and I'll connect these 3 points, and this is where you make the cut so that the outlet will still be able to come forward and sit on top of the tile. That's what I'm cutting out. There is the cut, and like I said, you want to keep this part to be able to sit on top of the tile. So without loosening this up, prongs are gonna sit flush on the face. Now to get this where you need it, only touch this part. If you touch those screws, you will be shocked at how you feel. So I'm going to touch this part only and slide this up underneath, and there it goes. When I screw that back in, it has enough to grab onto, and this will be flush with the rest of the tile. Making this cut is a little bit difficult, so you can't get your blade really in there without damaging the rest of the tile that you need to keep. So there's a trick. These are called kerf cuts, and basically you're gonna start here and move it like a millimeter every time, and you'll get a bunch of little slivers, and then you can break them out and clean up your cut. Let me just show you. And there you go, that's the cut. This is the top part of the outlet. Careful when you're working with these outlets. Right now this power is on, it's hot, so just work with caution. You could turn this off if that gives you peace of mind. Always use these as your handles. Now I'm gonna have to use longer screws because we've come off the wall quite a bit. And you don't have to do this right away. I'm just doing this now to show you. You can wait until the tile has dried. You definitely don't want to pull it in tight. Just set it there. Just wanted to show you how the tile is, or the outlet is sitting on the tile. If you make this hole bigger, you're gonna be in need of something to bump it out when it comes time to put the wall cover plates back on. And there you go. Now you have the knowledge to go around your outlets and basically tackle any kind of cut that comes up during the backsplash process. Finally, it is the last piece. Beauty. That's all, folks. Last piece is in. We're gonna let this set up, and tomorrow we're gonna grout. Done. It's day 3. You're finished with all your tile and you are ready to grout. So let me show you what you're gonna need to get that done. You have your grout here. This is a sanded grout. There's 2 different types. You can do sanded or unsanded. Sanded is like your standard kind with grit in it. That's normal. Your unsanded is gonna be for glass tile. That's way it doesn't scratch the surface whenever you're putting the grout on. That's really the only reason you will need unsanded grout. I also have a silicone to match. These are colored. This is snow white and the same color with the grout. You're gonna use a caulk gun with this, and you're gonna need your grout float. This is what you're gonna put the grout on the wall into the tile crevices with. And then you're gonna need a bucket of water, clean water, and then your bucket you're gonna mix your grout with. So we're gonna mix this up in here, let it set up a little bit. You're gonna mix it up basically the same way you did your thin set, but you want this to be able to flow. You don't want it so dry. So follow the instructions on the bag itself, and you'll be set up to succeed. All right, so let's get it done. You're gonna also need a mixer, of course. This is what I'll use right here. Now I put some water in here to start. I'll probably only use 1/4 of this bag. Grout goes a long way. You only have to fill those small little crevices. You don't want to breathe this stuff in. Try to hold your breath or use a vacuum. There's many different ways, but it's not good to breathe this stuff into your lungs. I added a little bit too much water, so I'm just gonna add more mix to get the right consistency. Still too much water. Now we're getting there. And there we go. That's a good consistency right there. It's not too dry. You know, I can work this over the face of the grout or over the face of the tile with no problem. Now, per the instructions here, it says to mix it, then you're gonna wait 5 minutes, and then you're gonna remix it again, but make sure you do not add any more water when you remix it. Then we'll be ready to use this. So let's just set a timer for 5 minutes and counting. Okay, 5 minutes just passed, so I'm gonna give it another mix, and then we're ready to start. Okay, let's do it. The object of the game is basically you're just gonna be smearing this on the face of the tile, trying to work it into all the crevices, and then you're gonna keep working down for about 5 minutes. Maybe you get to like right here, and then you need to stop and start cleaning the tile before this stuff starts to dry up a lot. So I'm gonna get started, and then I'll show you the process of going back to clean. So originally this was a little bit too dry. I added just a touch of water and just mixed it up here with the float. Now this will flow a little bit better, but you want to avoid this bottom line because we're going to silicone that after. If some gets down there, it's fine, but don't pack it in to that space. You want to use this like a squeegee and kind of get as much grout off the face of tile as possible. It just makes your cleanup easier, but it's gonna fall all over the place. That is to be expected. It's been about 5 minutes, so I got my wet sponge, and I'm just gonna go over the face of this and try to rub out what it does not need to stay. You can kind of shape the grout lines and just clean it up. This is the first pass. You're gonna get most of the grout off the face, and then the second time you're going to really like deep clean the tile itself. This is the first pass. You don't want to be too aggressive with it because the grout does need to stay in the joint lines. Just get out the excess. Sometimes I'm kind of using my fingernail to shape it, and then the sponge, the wet sponge, will smooth it back out. I went ahead and grouted all the backsplash, but if you have gotten some grout on this bottom line where you need to put silicone, you can use a little tool and just scrape it out. It's fairly malleable. You can still work it and get this out of here. You need to make some kind of void or a space for that silicone to go up underneath. So I just scrape this out, and now I have a nice little valley to fill, and you can just vacuum this up. But next step, we're gonna silicone this, and I'll show you how to do that. Something that I forgot to mention is once you're done with the grout and once you've cleaned it with water, what's gonna start to form is like a haze on the tile. And let me show you. You can kind of see it on my hand. Now that, you can get that off just by using a microfiber towel. Don't wet it, you just keep it dry, and you're just gonna rub, clean the face of the tile everywhere, and this will get rid of that haze. Now, if we were using like a darker tile, this would be way more obvious, but it's there, completely there. So go ahead and clean everything off, and then we'll be ready for the last step, which is silicone. All the grout is done. We are ready for silicone. Let me show you what you're gonna need. So you have your 100% silicone. Don't get the siliconized caulk because it's not as good. We have two products that you can use. So this is a finishing spray for silicone, or you can use a glass cleaner like Windex, or you can also use rubbing alcohol. That works very well. You're gonna need your caulk gun for this, and then a knife to cut this open, and then paper towels are gonna be what you use to clean up. And I like to wear gloves working with silicone because it's extremely sticky. Let me get into some of the details of how this process is gonna work. So first thing I did was clean the countertop and the tile. I just sprayed it with this Windex and made sure there's no haze or dust kind of sitting here because it will prevent the silicone from sticking. And now what I'm gonna do is cut the smallest hole that I can, like this, for the silicone. You probably can't see it, but this is about a 1/16 or an 1/8. And you wanna start with the smallest. If you cut this too big, you're gonna be putting way too much silicone and it's gonna make a huge mess. So I like to start with a small little hole and go ahead and get this thing ready, primed and ready, until you start to see a little bit of silicone come to the tip. I think I have to puncture this. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So you take this little tool that's built into the caulk gun and you're gonna just ream this hole. This is a little bit too small, so I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. There we go. All right, now we punctured the foil inside, and now just get this thing started. There we go. I'm gonna do this line right here first. You wanna put an amount that looks like the same size of the grout. If you put more than that, it's going to make a mess. I'm gonna keep going down. Sometimes whenever you're done with the caulk gun, it's gonna keep flowing out. And the best tip I can tell you is just take it off of this and relieve the pressure, and that will stop it from squirting out the top. So you're gonna set that aside, and you can use, first I'll use the Windex. So I'm gonna spray my finger and lightly spray this on the wall, on the silicone. Make sure your finger is wet, and you're gonna force it into the crevice using your finger. Now, I have a bunch on my hand. Instead of keep going, stop, clean your finger off, re-wet it, and work up, clean it off, and so on and so forth. You want to take your time with this. What the silicone, or what the Windex does, is basically it puts a barrier between your finger or your glove, and it prevents the silicone from sticking. It can become very messy if you don't wear gloves or if you don't use silicone spray or alcohol or Windex. All right, there's a little gap missing, so I'm gonna go back over it. Just take your time with this, and you want to squirt out just a tiny bit, nothing too much. Wet your finger and wipe, and there you have it. That part is done. I'm gonna get the top side. I'm even gonna get this mitered spot. I like to just like switch up and use different fingers so you don't have to keep stopping, and then you can clean off all your fingers at once, and you have 4, 5 more uses. Use your thumb, pinky, maybe use a paper towel if you need to. There you go. Okay, and once you're satisfied, you can move on to the next section. Now I'm gonna be doing the base of the tile where it touches the countertops. Doing this part is a little bit easier than like that wall we just did, because I can go like a long stretch and then come back and shape it the way I want. So I'm gonna go all the way down, but still taking my time and still only putting the same amount. Very gentle, very slow pace. You want it to be the thickness of your grout line. Maybe a little bit thicker, but nothing crazy. Some people like to put tape down. I'm not a fan of that. I think it's a waste of time, a waste of tape. It's not necessary. But if you feel more comfortable doing that, by all means. Now, sometimes you see me kind of zigzag and go back. That means I have passed a space where I still see a gap. Just backtrack, fill it, and keep moving. Nice and easy. Once you get a little more experience, you can work a little faster. But first you get good, then you get fast. Don't try to do it fast if you're new to this. You will make a mistake and you will make a big mess. Okay, all the gaps are filled. I want to show you how it looks before I spray. So this is how it looks before I spray. You can see it's not perfectly smooth yet, but all the gaps are filled all the way down. Now I'm going to spray, and then I'll do the same process, just using my fingertip to smooth it out. This time I'm gonna use the smooth finish spray. Spray all the way down, spray your finger, and just drag your fingertip along, and you'll see how smooth it is behind. I'm just smashing it, forcing it into that crevice, and then all the excess is on my finger. Now, go a little bit of a distance, stop, and clean your finger. If I were to try to go all the way down, I would have a glob of silicone in my hand that is going to eventually stick to the tile and the countertop. Don't do it. Take little breaks and clean in between. It's good if you just lay a paper towel down like this. You can just wipe your finger, keep moving. Now, let's say you got too much silicone and it looks a little thick. The line has widened out. Your grout line looks thicker now. What you can do is just go back and keep wiping it. Clean your finger, wipe it, clean your finger, and it will start to thin out. It just takes some finesse. It takes like a clean eye to notice these details. And I'm just, like I said, going back over it multiple times, swiping your finger, and it'll start to look better. Okay, that wall is done. Now I'm gonna hop on over to the adjacent wall and finish up. We just wrapped up this beautiful kitchen project, and we're so excited the way it turned out. If you have any questions about any steps or any products we use, drop a comment below and I'll be sure to answer all your questions. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more renovation tips and makeovers. See you guys next time.